Warning, the following podcast is intended for mature audiences only. Listener discretion is advised. If you are sensitive to any content or subject matter in films, I recommend looking up this film on doesthedogdie.com. It is a user-based database of extensive content warnings for pretty much every film you can think of. It basically gives you a heads up to all the potentially triggering topics a movie might have. Check it out and take care of yourself. Welcome back to We Creeps, the podcast where you can get all of your spooky without any of the scares. I am your host, Evan Exhumed, and every week I provide an in-depth summary, review, and trivia for the latest horror releases, classics, and some weird ones you probably never heard of. While the original purpose of this podcast is for the easily spooked, longtime horror fans are always welcome. We Creeps is now in its third season. Thank you so much to everyone who's been listening as I've posted over the year. We're going to be coming up on our 1 year by the end of October, and I will be doing an Instagram giveaway. So be on the lookout for how you can enter and win some cool stuff. Also, if you're enjoying this cool little theme going on in the background right now, you can thank Lucretia McEvil by following them on Instagram. Their Instagram is lucretia.mcevil, or you can watch their really cool video essays on their YouTube. Yes, they do horror video essays among many other things. My personal favorite is their video on the evolution of black horror, so definitely check that out. I'll also have some links for them in the episode description. With all that said, let's get started on season 3 of We Creeps. The film that I will be covering today is one that just recently released, very famous franchise. Maybe you've heard of it, Saw X, ladies and gentlemen. And call me crazy, call me maybe, but Saw X, hands down, is my favorite and the best of the Saw franchise. Yes, better than the first. Saw X was directed by Kevin Grudert, written by Peter Goldfinger and Josh Stolberg. It stars, of course, Tobin Bell, Johnny Smith, Snovi Mikodi Lund, Stephen Brand, Renata Vaca, and Michael Beach. With that out of the way, let's go ahead and get started on the plot summary of Saw X. Of course, this is the 10th movie in the franchise, so this is going to be filled with spoilers for the rest of the movie, so just be aware of that. But anyway, let's do it. The film opens up with John Kramer, who is Jigsaw, the main bad guy, and some crazy lights and stuff are flashing, and it turns out that he's in an MRI machine. It is revealed through the other movies that John Kramer has brain cancer, and that is one of the main motivators for him doing his weird Jigsaw shit, evil trap stuff. We see him going to cancer support victim meetings. He's listening to a few other people. There's this one guy named Henry who will come up later. He's talking about having stage 4 pancreatic cancer, and it's kind of a bummer. We then see that Kramer is in a meeting with his doctor, who's kind of like a young doctor. So, Kramer's a little salty about that, I think. And he's told, sometimes it's better to just accept that you're going to die than to fight all the way and have a very stressful last few months of your life. You only have about 3 or 4 months left. And Kramer's pretty upset about that. And so he just kind of bails. As he walks out of the hospital, he sees a janitor who is trifling and going through like this sick coma patient's stuff. And then we suddenly see this janitor in a jigsaw trap. And this jigsaw trap works by having these weird suctiony things attached to your eyeballs. And you have 3 minutes to break all of your fingers with the weird contraption or whatever. And if you break all your fingers, you don't lose your eyeballs. Unfortunately, the guy loses, but then we see that this actually wasn't a real trap. This was Kramer actually just fantasizing. And can I just say that I love that? I love that he's just coming up with this shit in his head when he sees people doing bad things. I would take an entire movie of him just walking down New York City and just strolling and just looking at people doing weird shit and him just fantasizing about how he would use that weird shit to make jigsaw traps. I would pay so much money for that movie. So yeah, the janitor, I guess, decided not to actually steal because Kramer was there looking at him, and Kramer's like, you made a good decision here. And he really did. He really did. So John is now at a little cafe, and we can see that he is writing his last will and testament, accepting that he's going to die. And then he runs into his friend from that little get together group, Henry, and he's just like walking up to the cafe and be like, "Can I get a blueberry muffin? I'm feeling great, blah, blah, blah. I'm in like attractive athletic wear." And Kramer's like, "Hey, Henry, like, what what's happening? You look great." He's like, "Oh man, I went to this crazy Mexican clinic and they just like cured my cancer with medicine and like a surgery. Here's my scar." And he like shows him his stomach for the pancreatic cancer removal scar. And he's like, "You got to do it, man. Like, here's the card." So he gives John the card, and John's like, "I don't know about this. It sounds kind of suspicious," but he looks into it. The organization is called the Penderson Project, and it is run by like a famous German, or I don't know, whatever, some European Germanic sounding human. He's a doctor, and he says that his method can cure cancer. And his daughter, I guess, has taken over it, and she is continuing his father's work. So he sends an email, and then a day later gets a call back from that organization. So she's like, "Yep, it's great. We got a 90% success rate. Kind of busy right now, though, so I guess we could slip you in." And so he's like, "Yeah, let's fucking go. I want to get this cancer right out of my brain." And she's like, "All right, just come to Mexico and we'll get you sorted out." So he flies to Mexico, and in Mexican tradition, a yellow piss filter is applied to the camera just so that everyone knows that this is now in Mexico. He gets picked up by a charming driver named Diego, who gives him a little drive around Mexico City, showing him a few little monuments before eventually going to the clinic. As they're driving to the clinic, a van suddenly drives right in front of them, and a bunch of dudes with like ski masks on come out and they're like, "Get the fuck out, get the fuck out. Are you John Kramer?" And he's like, "Yeah." And they're like, "Don't lie to me." He's like, "Yeah, no, I'm John Kramer." They're like, "Get in the van." And so they like take him, and then he appears at the villa, and they go from being like super angry and aggressive to like, "I'm so sorry for having to do that. We must be very careful. Please welcome to Casa de Cancer Free." I don't actually remember the name, but yeah, so it was just a way for them to take him to the clinic without actually showing him the location, which comes up later, like, because he finds it again, but without having to be kidnapped by these dudes. So I'm not really sure how he finds it again, but you know, that's kind of one of the only plot holes that I never figured out. This is where he meets one of the women who work at this little villa thing. Her name is Gabriella. She's like, "Yep, this Peterson stuff's pretty great. Saved my family." So it's kind of a verification to Kramer that this does work. Kramer then is introduced to Dr. Cecilia Peterson, the daughter of Dr. Peterson, and she gives him a little tour of the facilities. He meets a young boy named Carlos and his father, who are like gardeners or kind of like groundskeeper, upkeepers, basically. She then takes him to the surgical room, which is in like a really weird warehouse, but the actual surgical area looks really nice. That's where she meets one of the nurses, Valentina, the anesthesiologist, Mateo, and a patient who just got done, I guess, having surgery, named Parker Sears. This whole thing is already starting to feel kind of fishy because who the fuck just lets somebody into a hospital room post-surgery, like right away? So I think we all are calling bullshit right now. So after seeing all of that, he settles in a chair with Dr. Peterson, and she kind of gets to know him a little bit, and he's like, "Yeah, you know, I'm retired, but I do have some hobbies." Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. And she's like, "Oh, do you like fix classic cars?" And he's like, "No, I'm kind of like a life coach." And this is like so funny to me because I've always made jokes that John Kramer is just like a really fucked up life coach when it really boils down to it. So I think that inclusion of that line was sort of the writers poking fun at some of the jokes that they've seen fans make. So the night before Kramer's surgery, he wakes up feeling a little restless. He's nervous, and he runs into the landscaper's son, Carlos, whose bike rim is broken. And so there's a little touching moment with Kramer and Carlos, and he helps him fix it and also learns a little bit of Spanish, which will come up later. He teaches him the word for pull. So he helps him like put the rim back into shape, and Then we move on to the surgery. It's the next day, and Kramer is he's just a little nervous and stuff, but they're reassuring him everything's going to go great and he's just going to be A-okay. So during the surgery, he has to be awake. And one of the things he notices is the screen or the camera screen that's being used to do the brain surgery, which is, honestly pretty common. And he notes that in his head and then kind of passes out, which is also very common because they do have you on a lot of drugs. You're just kind of semi-conscious for it. He wakes up the next day and Dr. Cecilia Pedersen is there and she says, "Hey, it's been a total success. You should be good now. Just keep taking this medicine. Don't take your bandages off or get them wet at all for like 8 days. And you are golden. You are just cancer free. It's magic." And Kramer is just so fucking moved. He cries. He looks into the distance. We see a little montage of him like at a park drawing his fucked up traps. And he looks at it and he just goes, "You know what? No, maybe I'm done with this." And he rips out the page in the notebook and throws it away. And I always make this joke that if you cut a lot of these scenes, you could totally make like a fan video that just says like, "What if Kramer did not become Jigsaw?" or something like that. Like if his cancer got cured and he just stopped trying to murder people. It's very emotionally moving, especially because this dude is a fucking serial killer. Like I felt emotionally connected in this movie with Kramer. And I think that's one of the main reasons that I like this movie so much, because I always thought he was just a fucking asshole for all other 9 movies. So, feeling good, he decides to get a present for the woman Gabriella that he first meets when he entered the villa. And he sees the villa has been like totally cleaned out, just totally fucked up. He is kind of shocked and he goes into the warehouse where the medical procedure was done. And everything has just been wrecked. The glass box thing that he was in has just been broken. And he sees on one of the monitors that the surgery that was done on him, that he was seeing that video of, was actually just a fucking DVD of brain surgery. And he is pissed. I mean, there's just a silence of rage that comes over him. And he takes the bandages off his head and there's no fucking scar. Boom. Kramer got played. He always asks people, "Do you want to play a game?" And he got played, which is just fucking, that's crazy. And this now becomes one of my favorite genres of movies, which is you just fucked with the wrong stranger. Things like John Wick, Nobody, etc. Saw X is now part of that genre. So first on John's hit list is the taxi driver, Diego. He kidnaps him in his taxi and then puts him in a trap. The trap is 2 pipe bombs stitched or like metal wrapped around in his flesh, and then his hands are duct taped with scalpels, and he has to like scalpel the bombs out of his wrists or something. And if he tries to just pull them off or whatever, they'll just explode. So he has 3 minutes to do this. We also learned that Diego was one of the doctors in the room. He was one that had a mask on. And goddamn, what a reveal. Diego actually ends up getting those scalpels and removing the pipe bombs from his wrists. So he survives Jigsaw's first trap. We then move on to the next victim, who is Valentina. And we learn that she is a sex worker. So someone in a pig mask, which is a reference to the other movies. A pig mask is something that John sometimes wears when he's kidnapping people. So Valentina gets kidnapped as well. We then move on to one of the other people, Mateo, who pretended to be an anesthesiologist. He's actually like a veterinarian or something, or like an assistant. And he is selling drugs to Gabriella, who is revealed to be a drug addict. So there's that crossover there. Both of them end up getting kidnapped by that same pig mask figure, who I know who this is, but we'll leave the reveal for a little bit. We then finally make it to the ultimate scam artist, Cecilia, Dr. Pedersen, who I don't think at this point is actually a doctor, but she's just chilling at her giant mansion, and she's looking at a bulletin board that has like all of her marks and the people that she's going to keep scamming, and she's actually in the middle of another scam as we are watching the movie. And so John and his assistant, yes, revealed to be Amanda from Saw 2. Well, she's from Saw 1, 2, and 3. She is his apprentice. And she is in this movie, which is crazy because Saw 2 came out 18 years ago. So yeah, Amanda and Kramer fucking kidnap all of these people and they bring them back to the giant warehouse for traps. So a little time passes, everyone wakes up in the warehouse, and of course, they're a little bit upset. Kramer and Amanda show up. Amanda puts everyone's clothes, that like the jacket and a cell phone, in the very center of the room, but nobody could reach, obviously. And the first person who's going to be getting tested is Valentina. So her trap is she is tied to a pole, and there's this like wire wrapped around her neck, like kind of it's really hard to describe these traps, goddamn. Basically, the trap is she has to cut her own leg off and then put enough bone marrow into this tube thing. Otherwise, there's like a super sharp wire wrapped around her neck and it'll start moving really fast, so it'll cut her head off if she doesn't do it. So Valentina, after talking some shit to Amanda and Kramer, begins her test. She only has 3 minutes to saw off her leg with a wire. And so, yeah, after some hesitation, she ends up sawing the fuck out of her leg, and she does it. She implants the thing, and the bone marrow starts filling the little vial thing, and it's weighted. So once it's full enough, then the trap will stop. And unfortunately, she only has 3 minutes to do this, so she doesn't end up doing enough. And the trap activates, and the saw thing chops her head off, and she dies. I mean, she just barely loses. And I think that because Kramer was so mad at these people, he gave them less time than they really, could have done practically. Technically, they could have done it, but it was mean. So yeah, she dies, and Kramer and Amanda are having a conversation about Gabriella, the drug addict. And Amanda feels kind of bad for her because Amanda herself was a drug addict before she was tested. She survived the test that Kramer gave her in Saw 1, and she actually thanks Kramer for getting her clean. And so we do see a bit of empathy from Amanda, but Kramer, not as much. So as Amanda and Kramer are talking about his imminent death and how she's going to take over the family business, the victims hear the phone that was left on that table in the center of the room. And while none of them can reach it, they try to figure out how they can get to it. And Cecilia, the evil head woman who, is the reason they're all here, decides to get Valentina's organs and use them to sort of lasso the little table in the center of the room and pull it and make a phone call. So Cecilia is able to grab the phone, and just as she is making the call, she gets shocked by the chain collar that is on her neck. They've all been chained up. I just didn't specify where. Shortly later, Parker Sears, the patient that was right before Kramer, comes with a gun to try to see what's going on. So he's either a cop or he is involved somehow. So Amanda ends up sneaking up on him and knocking him out and chaining him to a chair. So Kramer ends up sitting down with him and is like, look, you and I both got scammed. Kind of sucks, right? I'm going to do my thing. I need you to just chill out. I'm going to unlock you. But just remember, no guns. Don't get your gun back. Don't try to be a hero or anything, and you'll be fine. So Parker is just a little, he's a little upset about this, but it seems like he's going to comply at the moment. So Amanda goes back down into the main area and tases the fuck out of Mateo, who is yelling at her, but she unlocks him and puts him in a trap for him to complete. She also whispers to Gabriella to shut the fuck up and behave because she is trying to help her a little bit because she feels bad that she's a drug addict and Amanda was a drug addict. So now the trap that Mateo is in is sort of like an electric chair, but it has like a big mask thing that has super hot coils on it. And his test is that he has to remove a certain amount of brain matter, like physical brain, and put it in this little weight thing. And if he does enough of it, then the trap will disarm. So he has to do brain surgery on himself in 3 minutes, which is kind of insane. And the reason he's doing this is because he was the one who was supposed to be the brain surgeon, I guess. So initially he tries to mouth off and fight back, but it does not work. He gets electrocuted. And so he attempts to remove enough brain matter from his brain, and they give him all the tools and stuff, of course. And so he does remove some of his brain, but unfortunately not fast enough, and the mask thing shuts on his face, burning him to death with the coils. So after Mateo's death, we get a little bit of a tender moment between Kramer and Amanda. They hug each other. She's just really gonna miss him when he dies. And so, they're both horrible people, but this movie does a good job of framing them as pretty, someone you can empathize a little bit with. So Gabriella is next to be tested by Jigsaw, and her test is she is hung by her wrist and her ankle. Like, one is connected to the ceiling, the other one is connected to the floor, and there is an X-ray machine that is pointed directly at her without any covering, and she has to essentially break her wrist and her ankle to get out of the cuffs and fall to the floor so she stops getting radiation damage. So she starts with her wrist, which is the smartest thing to do because you would immediately fall to the floor. But Cecilia says, no, do your ankle first so you swing out of the way of the machine and then you'll have more time to do your wrist. So she tries that based on Cecilia's recommendation, and the machine ends up just moving back towards her. So she gets insanely bad radiation damage, but she does get free and falls to the floor, thus winning at the game. So after she wins, Kramer tells Amanda to take her to a hospital immediately because if you do win a Saw game, he does take you to a hospital to get medical attention. But Parker Sears, the guy who came to save them, grabs his gun and holds both Kramer and Amanda at gunpoint. So Parker Sears takes them down to the main room and releases Cecilia. And of course, they're dating. They make out a little bit, and it's revealed that Parker Sears was also totally involved in this. He was part of the scam, and Kramer and Amanda are both restrained via the chains. And Kramer's like, that's cool what you're going to do to us, but Gabriella won the test, so we should take her to a hospital. And Cecilia's like, no, I don't think I'm going to do that, and just fucking stomps on her head, killing her, thus proving that Cecilia not only tricks people into giving them money, pretending to cure them of cancer, but she's also just fucking crazy and a murderer and a sociopath. So somehow worse than John Kramer. At this point, Cecilia and Sears also have figured out that very obviously John Kramer is Jigsaw. So just as Cecilia is going to put them both in a trap, they hear little Carlos, the little boy from earlier that Jigsaw helped, and they're like, oh, we're going to make this even harder for you. So they end up grabbing Carlos from outside and putting him in the two-person trap that Kramer created. This trap basically straps you to this board and then, like, by the neck, and then blood, I don't know where he got this blood spurts on you, and it's basically waterboarding you with blood. And there's a little lever that you can pull that will tilt the board towards one person or the other. And so he tells the little boy, don't pull that lever. However, this boy is kind of a homie, and he does pull it towards himself to spare Kramer from dying. So as this is happening, Cecilia and her boo thing are like, all right, we're just going to leave you to die. So we're going to go grab our money that you took from us. I forgot to mention that they had about $8 million that they had collected from scamming people. So yeah, they go into the office and they're like, yep, we're just going to grab this $8 million and get out of here. But plot twist, Kramer and Amanda already knew this shit was going to happen. So they actually rigged the room to seal shut and start dispensing some like crazy poison gas that like burns your skin. And the game that Cecilia and her boo thing have to pass is one person can live by putting their head through this little hole to still breathe and not die. And then the other has to die in the room. So Cecilia is able to overpower her boo thing and stab him with, like, I think a piece of glass or something. And she puts her head through the little hole and she's able to survive, but, still trapped in that room, I guess. So it's kind of unclear whether or not she dies. And Amanda, I guess, had an extra spare thing of keys or the locks on their necks had like a special little button that unlocked them. So Carlos, Kramer, and Amanda are totally fine. They end up walking out of the warehouse with the actual real money, the one that they had switched before making the trap. And yeah, he just looks up at her with her head through that little hole thing and is like, all right, bitch, peace out. I win. And they open the sliding door, and it's like a beautiful Mexican sunset. And Kramer has his arm around Carlos and hands him fucking $8 million. And it's just like, yep, take this to your family. This is totally a normal amount of money that I can just give an 8-year-old. And then the movie fucking ends. But wait, there is a mid-credits scene that also reveals that the dude with the scar who had pancreas cancer was actually part of the scam too. And we see another one of Jigsaw's apprentices, Hoffman, who hasn't been seen in a while. He is helping him start this trap. So the movie ends finally, with Kramer and Hoffman looking at the man being tortured by the trap. So yeah, that was Saw X, my new favorite of the Saw franchise. Holy shit, what a good movie. I mean, it's hard to really capture just how fucking good this movie is. I really think you got to see it, especially if you're a Saw fan. The emotional aspect of it, seeing everything through Kramer's perspective, which has never been done before. It's usually just, there's a protagonist who's trying to stop Jigsaw, and Jigsaw is the antagonist. We've never had a situation where Jigsaw was technically the protagonist, and I really fucking love that. And good news, they're already planning on making a Saw 11, so when that comes out, I will be there. Now let's move on to our next segment of the show, Trick or Trivia.
I want to play a game.
The composer for the film's soundtrack, Charlie Clouser, of Nine Inch Nails, actually dethroned John Williams, yes, the Star Wars guy, by contributing the greatest number of consecutive U.S. feature film scores in one series. So he did 10 scores for the Saw series, dunking on the Star Wars legend. Trivia 2, this is actually the longest Saw movie ever, running at 1 hour and 58 minutes, which to me is crazy because it went by so goddamn fast. Trivia number 3, there was a brief snag to the editing as first assistant editor Steve Forn had the cops call on him while he was editing the movie because his neighbors thought that somebody was genuinely being tortured in his residence. The scene specifically was the one, the eye vacuum that happened at the very beginning. And so, yeah, the cops thought it was pretty funny once everything was cleared up. But this dude got the cops called on him for Saw X, which is wild. That's it for Trick or Trivia. Join us again next time to learn more about your favorite horror movies.
Most people are so ungrateful to be alive. But not you. Not anymore.
Thank you so much for joining this episode of We Creeps. We will be back again next Monday for another episode. Please, please, please check out my Instagram, Twitter, my Patreon. You can find all of that at WeCreeps.com. We also have merch, lots of good stuff. Send me a message and let me know, your thoughts on a movie, or maybe there's one you want to hear me cover. So just let me know and I'm happy to look into it. With all that said, I'm so glad to be back. I hope everyone has a wonderful start to October. It's the month of Halloween, and I don't even think I have to remind you at this point, especially with October, but don't forget to stay spooky out there.